This lecture will cover parent education. So what is parent education then? We've spent a lot of time this semester talking about understanding where parents are coming from, really meeting them where they're at. Well, parent education is that next step where if you've built a strong relationship with families and if you can kind of understand where folks are coming from, then you can meet them there and offer things that might help to make parenting a little bit easier. So we're really talking about family support programs that offer family community interaction. So it's the family and then you're a member of the community, your program perhaps, or maybe you're bringing in some other person to talk about a topic. And the function of the parent education events are to stimulate parents to examine their relationships with their children and also to encourage interaction among parents. So again, you have to start with a place where parents feel welcome and not criticized, where they don't feel like, oh, okay, well, the school thinks they know everything about how to parent my child. And once you're past that barrier, everyone can acknowledge that parenting is actually a very difficult job, and we all need suggestions about how to do things like get our children to bed on time and get them to eat an array of foods instead of just dessert or things that taste so sweet and delicious. And those are challenges that parents have. How do you deal with temper tantrums? How do you work through toilet training? How do you help children negotiate the next developmental phase where they're at? And so parent education has that role where you are able to offer some of that information to the parents that are involved in your programs. So some examples of pre-designed parent education programs are listed for you here. You also have information embedded within the course that talks about this, so you can seek out some information related to these. But the programs listed here on this slide are the ones that are the most well-known. So parent effectiveness training, for example, talks about communicating effectively with kids and step-by-step advice. A lot of times it's marketed by saying things like how to talk so your kids will listen. And it's about 40 years old, I guess, around the, end of the first decade of the new millennium. And basically, instructors get certified. And there are brief lectures, demonstrations, workbook exercises, role-playing, homework, and small group discussion. It's like taking a class. And again, when you're in that program with other folks are talking about the struggles that they have with their children. So parent effectiveness training is one model. Then there's systematic training for effective parenting, or the STEP program. And the STEP program talks about they have programs for babies, toddlers, and preschoolers, and they have sort of leader training and parent handbook, and they use videos. So a lot of the same stuff. And their sessions are arranged around a lot of developmental issues: understanding young children, behavior, self-esteem, communicating, cooperation, disciplining, and nurturance by the parent. You will find that most parent education programs do focus a lot on developmental stuff. How to understand really that children who are 2 can do this and children who are 4 can do this. Okay, active parenting today. This is a video-based program. Actually, they're not calling themselves Active Parenting Today anymore. They're calling themselves Active Parenting, but you can still see a lot of places where it's called Active Parenting Today. Just know that it's the same, it's the very same program. And this was developed in the early 80s, and the revolutionary idea there is that if you use video-based training, that's more effective, because we were becoming a more media-involved society. And the idea is that if you have a lot of video clips and participants guides and activities and discussion and practice and feedback, that you absorb the information more effectively. And again, it covers a lot of developmental information, things like that. Now Avance is interesting because it's a multi-service program. Avance offers parenting classes, and in the parenting classes they talk about an overview of parenting and physical needs and behavioral and cognitive and emotional needs, social needs of young children, goal setting, nutrition. They focus a lot on nutrition and prenatal needs. And then they have kind of other components to it too, like they have a toy making component, because Avance really is marketed toward parents who are living in poverty environments in general. Most Avance participants are poor, and so we find that the model looks at having weekly 3-hour classes that goes from about September to May. You've got early childhood education for the children of adult participants, and home visits, transportation to and from program services, advocacy, support, meals during class time. And graduates of Avance are encouraged to go on and work on adult education and college. And so again, something as simple as a toy making class, if you're in a poverty population, can be very helpful. So you learn how to make stuff out of things that are cheap or free, and how making those things together can make parents really very proud. It's a very important component of the program. And then community resource awareness, they talk about that, how as a component of parenting you would need to seek out information related, let's say, to vaccinations and good nutrition and safety in the home, like making sure you don't have lead paint on your walls, things like that. So that's a huge focus. And then there are referrals to early childhood education programs where possible, so it gets braided into programs that are Head Start or like Head Start in various communities. Home visits are often included in Avance programs. So Avance programs generally, because they offer all of these services, at least components of them, usually have many aspects of funding. So they might get like a teeny tiny little bit from a locality, but then they also have like fundraising or money that comes through philanthropic organizations and other things, and some components of the program, like the early childhood education, might be very explicitly braided into things like Head Start eligibility or things like that. But in any case, they focus quite a bit on the parent relationship and on teaching folks how to try to find the things that their children might need in order to advance in the world, even with the limited resources that folks have. Now, Center for the Improvement of Child Caring are multiple session parenting classes that meet once or twice a week for several weeks, where all of the program's parenting skills are presented. There are one-day seminars, and again, they focus on lots of developmental information. Okay, in terms of considerations for parent education, the first thing that you want to think about is the role of professionals. A lot of parents are not going to want to sign up for multi-week programs like I described in the last slide. Sometimes parent education is just a one-night seminar, temper tantrums, how to deal with them. And it's just as simple as that. You just bite off a chunk. So we think about the role of the professionals involved. And you match programs to parent characteristics and needs. I actually taught parent education to folks that have been referred by the probate court. They were mandated to take parenting education classes. What that means is that they had been identified by Child Protective Services as being required to take parent education courses as a component of reuniting with their families. That's usually Child Protective Services' first strategies, to see if parents can get some parenting information to find out what they need to know so that they can keep the family together. It's only in rarer cases where the state will step in and say that that's not going to work. So these were all folks that had supervised visitations, and they needed to be told things that were very basic, like, no, that 10-month-old was not defying you when they threw their food off of their tray. They just thought it was a fun game, because this is what 10-month-old children do. Well, that 3-year-old was not necessarily defying you when they didn't finish cleaning their whole room that you asked them to do. It's just that's a big job for a 3-year-old. If you're not right there helping them to put toys in the toy box, they will get distracted by a bird that flew past the window, and you know, they'll get 10 seconds in and say, look at the bird. So folks sometimes need to know these sort of very basic components of information. These are dramatic examples. You're less likely in the context of most of your programs to have a whole room full of folks that need information as basic as that. But anyway, you do want to think about what are the characteristics and needs. Sometimes at the beginning of the year, one of the things that you can do is you can ask parents, what kind of programs would you like to see? A lot of parents are really interested in helping their child learn to read early. They're interested in how to get their children to be less picky eaters. They're interested in how to negotiate toilet training and temper tantruming. Those are always very popular topics. And if you ask parents, hey, what might you be interested in? They'll be glad to tell you. And you want to pay attention to the social context of parenting. It's very important when you facilitate a group like this to foster an environment where people really feel comfortable saying, well, it's just that sometimes when they have a temper tantrum, the only thing that seems to work is a cookie. And I know I shouldn't give my child cookies all the time, but on the other hand, if I've got to get ready for work and you want parents to be able to share those things, because the truth is that all parents have moments where they do something that they think, ooh, that might not be in the textbook. I think I just bribed my child because I only have 20 minutes or whatever. And to figure these things out, you want to support what parents are doing, expose parents to new ideas. I think that's very important. One of the things that I have definitely seen in my work with abusive families is I've seen that a lot of parents need strategies that are different from spanking. Not all spanking is abusive. One swat with an open hand, not an object on the behind, for example, we don't classify that definitionally as abusive. But I do know from my work with parents that many, many times beatings start off as a spanking that just got away from the person. I mean, these parents, these abusive parents that I've worked with, they didn't wake up in the morning and say, today I would like to beat my child. It got away from them. And they don't have any other strategies other than spanking. So it's pretty important to introduce other things. And I do find that discipline in general is always a hot topic, that's something that people really want to hear about. Like, how do you effectively use timeout? Because timeout does not always work that well either. Like for some kids and in some situations it doesn't work at all. So presenting lots of different strategies, these are the kinds of things that folks are wondering about. So you do want to, like I said, pay attention to that social context of parenting. Some of the assumptions that are underlying parent education is that parents are adults and have specific needs and wants. I mentioned that survey earlier and said, well, if you just ask folks what they need, sometimes they'll tell you. And parents are motivated to learn things that would improve life for them and their children. Everybody wants their kids to turn out well. Nobody ever looks at that newborn in the hospital and says, someday I hope to visit you in jail. Everybody wants the best for their kid. It's just that sometimes we don't know how to get there. We have our own negative practices. We have our own difficult histories. We have our own lack of knowledge. We have gaps sometimes. Parenting is a tough job, even under the most ideal of circumstances. So all parents need information and support. And I will say, for me, something that works well in parent education settings is to be really clear with people that I make mistakes in my parenting too. And I've taken a lot of child development classes, and I've taught child development classes, but even so, I am not a perfect person, and I still make mistakes. I still have days that I think, oh, I think I was a little too harsh there, or oh, I think I was way too lenient there, and it's a hard job. So I think part of your success in parent education is to be very approachable. That's a really important component. Okay, so implementing a parent education program, again, ask parents what they want. Talk to parents, send out surveys, and find out, what is it that you want to see? Some groups of parents might say, I want to see how I can put limits on the Xbox and the TV and the Wii and whatever else that's media involved. Or I want to see what kind of cool computer programs there are. Well, those are both very interesting and related topics and great areas for parent education. How much media screen time is too much or enough or just right? And since probably nobody's going to say, well, we just won't have a TV, or we just won't have a computer, or we just won't do anything technological, then what would be some things that you could provide? That's just an example of how you could meet a community need based on what parents are telling you they want to know. You want to select styles of meetings for interaction. It's different in every community. Oftentimes the programs where you meet, once a week for multiple weeks, those are oftentimes successful in communities where you have parents that are identified as needing a lot of different kinds of services. In busy Northern Virginia, it might be having like people like their information kind of small bites, like one-time meeting, an hour and a half, tantrums. Very specific, very targeted. You have to think about your population, what it is that they want to talk about. Or maybe 2 different sessions on how to introduce more vegetables, and then another one that's like, how to cut back on, or creative ways to make healthy lunches, how to cut back on desserts, things like that. And then you want to have the logistics that support successful meetings. I will say that you cannot have parent education without having a backup babysitting plan. Somebody is always going to show up with those kids, and you might want to just build it in and say, okay, well, we'll do it from 6:30 to 8 o'clock, and we'll provide childcare. Okay, is it true that some of your children should be in bed before 8 o'clock? Yep, that's true. But are you going to miss an opportunity to share information with parents that could help them in their home by assuming that everybody actually really puts their kids to bed by 7:30? Probably not, because a lot of those parents then won't have the information, and they're still going to put their kids to bed at 9 o'clock anyway. Maybe you want to have a session on, how much sleep do children really need. And you can do that, but as I said, be prepared for the irony of it, because if you don't provide childcare, you will miss a targeted group of parents, and it's usually the parents that need that information the most. So in terms of the logistics, I would say that. I would also say food can also be a really important aspect to think about. And I will also say that in some populations, you might see that people roll in 10 or 15 minutes late. So you have to think about that. You have to talk with your community and say, like, okay, well, if we say that we're going to start at 7 o'clock, are we really starting at 7:30? And we have like half an hour of socialization built in, and we have, snacks and things out where parents can talk to other parents, and we start promptly at 7:20 or at 7:30. Because if we start at 7, then we're going to have a steady stream of people that trickle in, and then they're going to feel unwelcome because you've already started. So you have to think about all of that kind of stuff in terms of supporting successful meetings. And again, I will say to you that the best way to figure out how to do that is to ask the parents that you are actually trying to reach. You can always find that, those 1 or 2 people in the crowd that are like your parent leaders, your connectors in the community, and say to them, well, what do you think would work? What do you think would be a good time to start this meeting? And think about it like that. Okay, so in terms of viewing parents as decision makers, when we offer these types of programs and we ask parents about what they need, and we ask community members about what would be successful in the community, we are treating parents as advisors and policymakers. We want parents to feel that they're an important part of the process. We want parent cooperative schools. We want we want parents to feel welcome to make suggestions. And we want them to feel welcome to be there, to be around. And there are some challenges of successfully including parents in decision making. Sometimes parents will want things that you're not necessarily able to provide, and you have to figure that out. You have to negotiate that. Also, sometimes you get I don't know, cliquey kind of power stuff, like the kind of thing you see in, in high school movies. Sometimes you get those dynamics occasionally working in groups, because maybe 1 or 2 parent leaders is really involved, and someone else might feel less involved or more left out. Sometimes you can get problems between a few parents that are involved in, let's say, a parent board and things like that. I don't really know that there's any way to prevent that, but you have to try to just deal with it as it comes up and try to make folks feel valued as best as you can. But it's still worth it having parent feedback in terms of decision making.